Welcome to Sunday Express. We continue with our discussions tonight, where the memories of the COVID-19 pandemic are still fresh. And many are now asking, are African countries better prepared for the next outbreak? And how dangerous are these diseases like Ebola and Hantavirus? And what should ordinary citizens know to protect themselves without panic or misinformation? Well, to help us understand the risks and preparedness and the science behind these outbreaks, we are now joined by Dr. Shamsa Ahmed. She's an infectious disease physician. Welcome to the program, Dr.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, so you know, emerging diseases, Ebola being one of them, Hantavirus just recently, we've, made headlines, in the Western countries. But before we get into Ebola and what it is, and Hantavirus for that matter, what are infectious diseases?
So, I mean, simply put, infectious diseases are anything that if I have it, I can pass on to you. That's the simplest way to put it. So whether it's through respiratory, meaning I'm coughing and sneezing, or whether it's through blood or secretion. So basically one person has to have it and then pass it on to someone else. What we're seeing at the moment is emerging infectious diseases, meaning these are diseases that have been there. They've been sitting somewhere, maybe sitting in an animal, sitting somewhere in the forest, and suddenly we're seeing an upsurge or an outbreak, or you're now finding it in different countries or different zones that we were not seeing before. So that's what we're talking about when we say things like Mpox or Hantavirus or Ebola virus.
Okay. Yeah, like you've rightly put it, like we are seeing, these are diseases which are there, but now, can I say, emerging. Yeah. For Ebola, it's not the first time that we're hearing about Ebola and all that, but just in a brief, what is Ebola?
So Ebola is what you call a zoonotic disease, meaning this is a virus that's been sitting in animals for a really long time. Meaning the first cases were, discovered, we say discovered, or rather we figured them out in 1976, but these are things that have been sitting like in the Congo forest for years. So a zoonotic disease needs an animal. That's where it's sitting, doing nothing. But for some reason, it manages to jump over into humans. So with the Ebola virus, what you find is it's found in fruit bats, it's found in non-human primates, so like monkeys, antelopes, and things like that. In areas like DRC, what happens is you have people who consume bushmeat, so they're out in the forest getting into touch with these animals. Now, when they get in touch with the animals and they're handling the blood of that infected animal, unfortunately, when the virus jumps into the human, that's when you start to find that we're having diseases. So there are different versions of the Ebola virus, but the three that have been important is the Zaire one that has caused quite a few outbreaks. Like you rightly said, we're actually on number 17. There's been the Sudan virus. And right now we have the Bundibugyo, that's the one that's causing a bit of uproar right now in DRC and has also spread to Uganda. So basically a virus that sits harmless in an animal, but when it gets a chance to jump into a human, that's when you're seeing all this sickness and devastation. Okay.
Yeah, there's a very close correlation, definitely, these outbreaks or these viruses and humans and animals, yeah? And from a little bit of my discussions and delving into health reporting and all that, can I say a bigger percentage of diseases affecting animals or actually from, affecting humans is actually from animals?
So we're seeing a big percentage of that because you see we're also changing how we used to interact with these animals. You see, before you'd find maybe we're not getting into these densely populated areas. So Ebola is a really good example. If you look at a country like DRC, you have conflict. Remember, we're also very good at climate change. We are the ones who are going in and destroying these habitats. So we're changing the ecosystem and we're changing how we interact with animals. Something we don't think about, because right now you see we're talking about things like Ebola and Hanta, but even for us who live in these areas, we keep a lot of animals and we keep them in our homes these days. So you find if we have dogs, we have cats, they share beds with us, they sleep with us, they eat with us, which is not different from you looking at places like Turkana or places where you have pastoralists who are also living with their animals. So we are changing our interactions with these animals and allowing these viruses new places or new hosts, which is why now we're starting to see all these diseases resurging again.
Okay. Yeah, so globally, recently we've heard about Hantavirus, and probably you can also enlighten us what hantavirus is?
So hantavirus is similar to Ebola in the sense that it starts in an animal. The only difference is for hantavirus, it's in rodents or rats. So if you have the secretions that come from the rodents, so it's their saliva, their feces, they contaminate the area, you come into contact with that, you pick it up and you start developing an infection. Remember, for Ebola and Hanta, when you first get the infections, it looked like any other infection, meaning you get high fevers, you're tired, you're weak, you know, you're feeling quite sick. With Ebola, especially this strain, you start getting vomiting and diarrhea. Now, the only problem with these things is you have a percentage of people who fall sick and get better. Then you have a percentage of people where things start to go wrong. And unfortunately, both of these diseases can end up what we're calling viral hemorrhagic disease, meaning you end up with some kind of bleeding disorder, which is what everybody is worried about when you hear things like Ebola. So the point is, you're getting into contact with animals. They have this virus. It doesn't do anything to them, but when it comes in contact with you, then you start to get these organ failures. For hantavirus, there are two versions. You can either get the one that will cause bleeding, so it attacks your kidneys, and that's usually what was happening with the people who get it in Africa and Asia and Europe. The one that you get in the Americas, and by that we mean like South America as well as like the US, that's the one that gives you cardiopulmonary syndrome, similar to what you'd get in COVID. With Ebola, the end of the virus is when you start getting this bleeding. But essentially, all that these viruses do is they end up damaging all your organs, and they have a long incubation period, meaning you can be roaming around not knowing you have this virus. Like Ebola, you're running around for 3 weeks. Hanta, you can run around for 8 weeks. And you know, usually that's the time you're sharing things, when you don't realize how sick you are.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, given the interconnectedness just globally, and even regionally within the East African region, talking about the DRC outbreak and now the Ugandan, you know, outbreak of Ebola, how vulnerable is Kenya? You know, people are moving, you know, through the borders and all that. I know the government or the Ministry of Health is doing a lot in terms of surveillance, and so far no cases have been reported in the country. But how vulnerable is Kenya given the interconnectedness?
I mean, all these years we're lucky that we've never had a positive case, so you have to look at it at two levels. By the time WHO is declaring it a public health emergency of interest, what they're trying to tell you is that globally we need to take action, we need to start surveillance, you need to start ramping up in your own country, getting the resources. Do you have the right PPE? Are your personnel trained? If maybe a vaccine has been on the back burner, like specifically for this strain of Ebola, we don't have a current vaccine and we don't have a current treatment, that means everybody starts mobilizing towards that. Having said that, it's still low risk. The reason we say low risk is because of how it is spread. For Ebola, you need to get into contact with the fluids of the body of the person infected with Ebola, which is why you see they're telling you if there's a funeral and you think that person is suspected to have died of Ebola, that's not the funeral to be attending. And you know, culturally, there are different ways we bury people or the rituals we have. For certain communities there, touching the deceased is an important part. So, you know, those are some of the educational things that they're giving out. So it's low risk in that sense because of the kind of contact you need to get the infection. It's not like COVID. Even you and I could be sitting like this and all I need to do is a few good coughs and you'll probably pick up the infection. It's low risk in that sense, but we still have to have a heightened sense of security. We still need to be tracing who is coming into our country. Usually you find airports, you can control them pretty well. I think our concern becomes more our land borders. Remember that there are lots of trucks that come between us and countries like Congo and Uganda. So those are the ports of entry that probably need to have heightened surveillance. So low risk, but a risk is still always a risk. Ebola is unlikely to turn into a pandemic at the level of COVID, again, just because of how it is spread. But we don't want to reach a point that you get 1 or 2 people in the country with, you know, suspected Ebola, and then now we are running behind ourselves.
I mean, and just like you've said, Ebola, at least ever since we started hearing about the outbreaks and all that, none has actually been found within the country, and that just speaks to the surveillance that is being done and all that. But where would you say still we have some weak links when it comes to dealing with such kind of infectious diseases that can spread so fast?
I think one is training. Like, we need to train our medical staff, because you see we got very ramped up with COVID, but of course as that goes down we tend to all become a bit lax. So I think the educational perspective, just for lay people, you know, general public, so we don't have panic, you understand what you should be looking for all healthcare facilities at all levels, so that everybody is already kind of looking out, and to make sure that we have the equipment, to make sure that we have the laboratories that can actually do the tests. You see, even the issue in DRC was that they were not testing for the right kind of Ebola. They were testing for the other virus, which is why for a long time they didn't pick up that this was the virus that was going through. So we need to make sure that our lab capacity in the country, I mean, we have 3 labs that can run that. Just because it's such a deadly virus, you can't just be doing it at every place. So we need to have the labs, we need to have the PPE. And I think even as a country, again, this gives us an opportunity to look at, can we start just developing our own vaccines? Can we start developing our own treatments? So we don't end up in a place like COVID, where again, we are looking at donors and looking at funding and hoping that somebody, you know, will help us. We need to be more proactive and not just always kind of reactive and defensive when things are coming up.
Exactly. And you know, during such kind of outbreaks, misinformation and a lot of myths go around. But how important is it for that constant community awareness, you know?
It's really important. You see shows like this, that's one thing. You do national reach, you need to do it in different languages, you know. You need to get community leaders involved, you need to get your religious leaders involved. Remember, we live in a time of a lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation. You have a lot of influencers. As long as you have a camera, you can say anything. We understand there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy, there's a lot of fear about the vaccines and things that we have. But you see, we can't give up. As long as you have the science and you have the truth behind it, then we just have to look at every avenue and every chance we get to make sure that we're giving out the right information, so people are not panicking. Because the issue comes when people panic. So that you see anybody who's arrived from Congo and you want to lock them down, understanding that even DRC is a big country. So the same way, if something was happening in Turkana, you're not going to say if somebody from Kenya has come from Mandera, they should be on lockdown. So we need to take, for the government, Ministry of Health, and for every clinician who's handling something like this, we just need to take every opportunity to make sure that we're giving out the right information to everyone in the country.
So what steps can people take, you know, just to protect themselves? We've heard about Ebola now, we are hearing about Hantavirus and very many others that have been there and probably will be there. But what should people do when, you know, there is that, can I say, we tend to relax because we're told, you know, we are safe in Kenya, none of these diseases have been found. But what are those active steps that we need to take, you know, constantly, even as the government does its part?
So one of the simplest things you can do to protect yourself from any disease is wash your hands. Like every opportunity you can get, you should be washing your hands, because in case you touch a contaminated surface or something, you wash your hands before it's touching your face, before, you know, you're eating. You need to wash your hands before, after you're going to the bathroom. Washing your hands is one of the easiest ways to protect yourself from anything. If you are not feeling well, you should not be the person attending big functions, whatever it is. If you're not feeling well, go to a healthcare facility, get tested. If you have any concerns or questions, always look for, and I say this, like a good healthcare facility where you can get answers. Things that you can get vaccines for, you should get a vaccine for. Unfortunately, for this strain, we don't have an Ebola vaccine. Is not given out everywhere. It's usually only given out in those high-risk areas. But for other diseases, if there's a vaccine available, inquire about it and get the vaccine. So, and then in your daily life, if you notice when we talk about anybody falling sick and if they die from it, we tend to say people who are healthy tend to survive things. So you should be eating well, you shouldn't be smoking, you should be looking at your alcohol intake, you should be looking at your weight. Are you exercising? If you do have an illness, so if you're already known to be diabetic or to be hypertensive, you should be making sure that you're following up with a doctor and making sure that those things are under control. That's how you protect yourself from falling sick from anything and everything. The likelihood of Ebola is minimal, but there's so many other infections you could pick up, which are here in Kenya at any time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shamsa Ahmed, a specialist in infectious diseases. We could talk about this particular topic for as long as we can have time, but unfortunately we don't have much time right now. But we hope that you've learned a little bit, if not much, from what Dr. Shamsa has said in terms of infectious diseases, and most importantly, what you should be able to take into consideration at a personal level, even as the government does its part in ensuring that surveillance is heightened. Thank you so much, Dr. for coming into the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Asante sana.